Woven. It is said that in Dongting Lake, there are often water gods who borrow boats to travel around the lake. Sometimes, when an empty boat is tied there, the rope will suddenly untie itself and start drifting along with the water. At this time, only singing and playing were heard in the air, and the sound of music was faint. The boatman crouched in a corner of the boat, closed his eyes, and listened attentively, not daring to raise his head to take a look, and allowed the empty boat to sail freely. After the tour, the boat will return to its original place to anchor. There was a scholar named Liu who returned to his hometown after failing in the scientific examination and got drunk and lay on the boat. Suddenly, there was the sound of sheng music in the air, and the boatman hurriedly shook Yagyu to get him to avoid it. However, Yagyu was too drunk to wake up, so the boatman had to hide in the cabin by himself. After a while, someone came over and grabbed Liaozhai. Liaozhai was so drunk that he let go and collapsed on the deck of the boat, still sleeping, and the man ignored him. For a moment, the music was loud. Yagyu woke up in a daze and smelled a strong blue musk scent. He squinted and peeked, only to see a boat full of beautiful women. He knew in his heart that they were gods, so he closed his eyes again and pretended to sleep. After a while, I heard the call Zhicheng, and a maid came over and stood right next to Yagyu's face. Liaozhai looked at the maid's feet. They had green socks and purple shoes. The feet were thin and thin, like fingers. He liked it very much and secretly bit her socks with his teeth. Just as the maid was about to move, he tripped and fell on the boat. A man sitting in the seat asked strangely, and the maid told him the reason. The man was furious and ordered the samurai to drag Yagyu away and kill him. Then a samurai came over, tied up Yagyu, and dragged him away. Liaozhai saw a person sitting on the throne facing south, wearing something like a crown on his head. So he walked and said, "I heard that Mr. Dongting's surname is Liu, and my surname is Liu. In the past, Mr. Dongting failed in the examination, and now I also failed. Mr. Dongting met a fairy has become a god, and now I'm going to be executed for molesting a maid while drunk. Why is there such a huge gap between luck and misfortune?" After hearing this, the man who looked like a king ordered Yagyu to be brought back and asked, "Are you a failed scholar?" Yagyu agreed. The king gave him a pen and paper and ordered him to write a poem with the title Wine Servant Girl in Misty Temples. Liaozhai was originally a famous scholar in Xiangyang, but after getting the title, he thought about it for a long time and did not write it for a long time. The king sarcastically said, "How could a famous scholar be like this?" Liaozhai put down his pen and defended. In the past, Zhuoxi wrote Sandu Fu and it took 10 years to complete it. It can be seen that the most valuable thing about an article is its exquisiteness, not its speed. The king smiled and nodded. After another 2 hours, Yagyu finished the manuscript. After the king finished reading, he was very happy and praised, "You are indeed a famous scholar." Then he ordered a banquet. And within a short time, delicacies were served one after another. While Yagyu and the king were answering, an official came over with a notebook and reported, "The list of drowned people has been prepared." The king asked, "How many people?" He replied, "A total of 128 people should be drowned." He asked again, "Who have been sent to do it?" The answer was, "Send Lieutenants Mao and Nan." Yagyu stood up and said goodbye. The king gave him 10 kilograms of gold and a crystal ruler, and said, "There will be a small disaster in the lake. Take this to protect yourself." Suddenly I saw people and horses guarding the ceremonial body. They were all lined up on the water. The king got off the boat and boarded the car, and then disappeared from sight. After a long time, the lake finally became silent. The boatman waited until all the gods and men disappeared, then climbed out of the cabin and drove the boat north. There was a headwind, and the boat was sailing very hard. Suddenly an anchor emerged from the water, and the boatman shouted in horror, "General Mao is out." All the businessmen on the boats immediately crouched in the boats. Not long after, a piece of wood appeared in the lake, standing upright in the water, rising and falling, shaking endlessly. The boatman became even more frightened and shouted, "General Nan is out again." As soon as he finished speaking, the wind picked up. There were huge waves in the lake, covering the sky and the sun, and all the boats around him capsized. Upon seeing this, Yagyu hurriedly raised the crystal ruler and sat upright on the boat. Strangely enough, the huge waves suddenly disappeared in front of Yagyu's boat. As a result, Yagyu's ship was saved. After Yagyu came back, he often talked about this strange thing to people. Talking about the maid on the ship, although I didn't see her appearance, her little feet under her skirt were like nothing in the world. Later, when Yagyu went to Zhicheng on business, there was an old lady named Shui who was selling her daughter, but she didn't want to sell her daughter. She kept a crystal ruler in her house and claimed that if there was someone who could match the ruler, she would marry her daughter to him. Liaozhai was very surprised, so he went to see what happened with his own ruler. When the old lady saw Liaozhai, she greeted him happily and hurriedly called her daughter out to meet him. Her daughter looks about 15 or 16 years old. She is charming, gentle, elegant, and unparalleled. After giving a brief salute, he turned back and retreated into the tent. Yagyu was fascinated and said hurriedly, "I also have something hidden. I wonder if it can match the old lady's." So both sides took the boundary ruler to compare and contrast, and found that the style and length were exactly the same. The old lady was overjoyed and asked where Liaozhai lived. She asked Liaozhai to go back and rent a car as soon as possible, leave the ruler as a token. Yagyu refused, and the old lady smiled and said, "You are too careful. How could I run away for a boundary ruler?" Liaozhai had no choice but to leave the boundary ruler behind, rent a car, and return in a hurry. The wife has disappeared without a trace. Liaozhai was shocked and asked everyone living nearby, but no one knew where he was going. The sun had already set in the west, and Yagyu was upset and walked back dejectedly. Halfway through the road, a car happened to pass by. Suddenly a person lifted the car curtain and asked, "Why did Liu Lang come so late?" When he looked up, it was old Mrs. Chui. Yagyu was overjoyed and asked, "Where are you going?" The old lady smiled and said, "You must be suspecting that I am a liar. After you left, I suddenly remembered that you were also living abroad, and it was difficult to handle these things. It happened to be I have a hitchhiker, and I want to send my daughter to your boat." Yagyu asked him to get back in the car and go together, but the old lady refused and left alone. Liaozhai was frightened and couldn't quite believe it, so he hurried to the boat. As expected, the girl and a maid were already there. When they saw Liaozhai, they greeted him with a smile. When Yagyu saw that the girl's green stockings and purple shoes were no different from the original maid in the ship, he was very surprised and stared at it hesitantly. The girl smiled and said, "Looking at you so eagerly, I haven't seen it before." When Yagyu heard this, he simply leaned down and took a peek. He saw that the tooth marks on the socks were still there, and he was shocked and said, "Are you whereupon?" The girl covered her mouth and smiled. Yagyu bowed and said, "If you are truly a god, please tell me clearly so that you can eliminate my troubles and confusion." The girl said, "To tell you the truth, the last time you met in the boat was Lord Dongting. He admired your talent and wanted to give me to you. Because I am the maid that the princess likes very much, so I have to go back and discuss it with the princess. I am back now just on the orders of the princess." Liaozhai was overjoyed, washed his hands, burned incense, and worshipped in Dongting Lake. So, he came back with Zhicheng. Later, Liaozhai went to Zhicheng again, and Zhicheng asked to go with him, so he went back to visit relatives. When he arrived at Dongting Lake, Zhicheng pulled out a hairpin from his head and threw it into the water. Suddenly a small boat emerged from the lake, jumped up gently, like a bird flying on the treetops, and disappeared in an instant. Liaozhai stared at the place where Zhicheng disappeared, hoping that she would come back soon. "I saw a large ship approaching from a distance. When I came closer, a window on the ship opened, and a colorful bird flew over and landed on the ground. Then someone handed over many precious things, such as gold and pearls from the window, all of which were given by the princess. From then on, Zhicheng returned to the lake once or twice a year to visit relatives, and Liaozhai became very rich. Every time he took out a piece of gold, silver, and jewelry, no one recognized his wealth. According to legend, Liu Yi in the Tang dynasty once sent a message to the dragon girl, and the dragon lord of Dongting recruited him as his son-in-law. Later, he passed the throne to him. Liu Yi had an elegant appearance, but Lord Long was afraid that he would not be able to intimidate the water monster, so he gave him a mask with a grimace. He wore it during the day and took it off at night. Over time, Liu Yi gradually got used to it. Once, I forgot to take it off at night, and the mask grew on my face. Looking in the mirror, I feel very ashamed. Therefore, from then on, when people were boating on the lake, as long as they pointed at something with their fingers, Liu Yi suspected that they were pointing at their own faces. People covered their foreheads with their hands, thinking that they were peeping at themselves. And the wind and waves often caused the boats to crash. Therefore, for those who take a boat on Dongting Lake for the first time, the boatman must first tell them these taboos, or place offerings to make sacrifices before they can cross the lake safely. Once, Zhicheng came to Dongting Lake by chance. He was blocked by wind and waves and could not cross. He was furious and arrested Liu Yi and sent him to the county prison in the human world. When the county jailer checks the prisoners, there is always one more person, and they don't understand why. One night, Liu Yi entrusted a dream to the county magistrate. Crying for salvation, the prefect felt that humans and gods were separated and he was afraid that there was nothing he could do, so he declined. Liu Yi said, Zhicheng will come here on a certain day and at a certain time. As long as he pleads on his behalf, it will definitely work. Soon, Lord Zhicheng arrived. The prefect interceded for Liu Yi and was released. From then on, boating on the lake became a little safer.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.